The velvet pouch burned in Daniel Cross' palm like a live grenade with the pin long pulled. Rain tapped a hollow rhythm against his apartment window, 3 days straight now, matching the 3 final notices stacked like a losing poker hand beneath his coffee mug. The electricity had been the first to go, then the internet, and now the landlord's red-inked ultimatum glared up at him. Eviction notice in letters sharper than any shrapnel he'd dodged in Kandahar. His fingers trembled as they traced the embroidered edges of the pouch, its navy fabric worn smooth by decades of secret handling. Inside lay the last tether to the man who'd taught him to whittle fishing lures from scrap wood and change a carburetor blindfolded. His grandfather's silver star from Normandy, never displayed, rarely spoken of, always kept wrapped in this same velvet shroud like some sacred relic. "You don't wear valor, Danny boy," Henry Cross had muttered once when teenage Daniel asked why the medal lived in a drawer instead of a frame. "You carry it quiet like." Now, at 33 with his VA claim lost in bureaucratic limbo and his savings bled dry by sleepless nights and dead-end job interviews, quiet valor wouldn't keep the roof over his head. The pawn shop's flickering neon, Rose's relics, "We buy gold and antiques," bled through the drizzle as Daniel shouldered open the door, the bell's cheerful jingle at odds with the funeral march in his chest. The air inside smelled of lemon oil and forgotten history, crammed with the detritus of other people's surrendered dreams. Tarnished trumpets, wedding bands divorced from fingers, a glass case of military pins staring at him like accusatory eyes. Behind the counter, an elderly woman with steel-gray hair pinned tight as a military bun peered over reading glasses, her hands, knuckles swollen with arthritis but steady as a surgeon's, cradling a pocket watch. "I'll be right with you," she said without looking up, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd spent a lifetime appraising both objects and souls. Daniel wandered past shelves of orphaned china and obsolete typewriters, each item whispering stories of financial desperation. His throat tightened. This wasn't like pawning his Xbox or leather jacket. This was the last tangible piece of Henry, the quiet, broken man who'd flinched at 4th of July fireworks and whose nightmares had smelled of French countryside and gunpowder. "What can I help you with today?" The woman, Rose, according to the name tag, finally looked up, her gaze sharp as a sniper's scope. Daniel's tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth. He placed the pouch on the glass counter with the reverence of a communion offering, the metal inside clinking softly. "I need to sell something," he managed, the words tasting of ash and betrayal. Rose's eyebrows lifted a fraction as she loosened the drawstring. When the silver star tumbled into her palm, something extraordinary happened. The shop's ambient noise seemed to hush. The ticking clock stilled. The furnace paused mid-breath. Her thumb brushed over the tarnished inscription, H. Cross 1944. Then Rose Alcott, who'd survived the Blitz and 7 decades of hard bargains, did something no customer had ever witnessed. She dropped the metal like it had shocked her. "Excuse me one moment," she whispered, clutching the star to her chest as she vanished through a beaded curtain, leaving Daniel stranded between dread and bewildered hope, the rain outside now pounding in time with his hammering heart. Somewhere in the universe's ledger, a 70-year-old debt was finally being called due. Time stretched thin in the pawn shop's hushed stillness. Daniel counted the seconds by the erratic drip of rainwater from his jacket. 1, 5, 10, before the beaded curtain finally stirred. When Rose reappeared, her face was a battlefield of emotions, her hands cradling a small wooden box and a yellowed photograph pressed to her chest like a prayer. Her voice, when it came, was barely audible over the rain's whisper against the windows. "Was your grandfather's full name Henry Thomas Cross?" The question hit Daniel like a stray round. "How did you?" Rose turned the photograph slowly as if unveiling a monument. The black and white image was worn at the edges, its sepia tones fading, but the scene was unmistakable. A young American soldier in a rumpled uniform crouched beside a gaunt little girl in a tattered dress. Behind them, the skeletal remains of a bombed-out building clawed at the sky. The soldier's hand rested on the girl's shoulder, not as a stranger's comfort, but with the quiet ownership of someone who'd already decided her survival mattered more than his own. Daniel's breath caught. He knew that lopsided smile, the way his grandfather's eyes crinkled at the corners even when his mouth didn't quite follow. "That's him," he whispered. His finger hovered over the girl's face. "And that's you." Rose exhaled shakily, her thumb brushing the image. "August 1944. The Germans had lists. My parents were on them." Her accent, usually faint, thickened with memory. "Your grandfather was left to guard me while the others went to warn the village. He heard the trucks before I did." A clock ticked loudly from the back wall as she described the cellar, the way Private Cross had shoved her beneath the floorboards with a hissed, Don't move, no matter what you hear. The gunfire that followed. The agonizing silence. I thought he'd abandoned me, Rose admitted, her voice cracking. Until the Americans returned at dawn. They said he'd led the Germans straight into an ambush, wounded but alive. Her fingers tightened around the photograph. I never saw him again. Never knew his full name. Only that he was Private Cross and that he'd traded himself for a village full of strangers. Daniel's knees threatened to buckle. The metal between them suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. He never told us, he said hoarsely. Not one damn word. Rose's smile was bittersweet. The real heroes rarely do. She opened the wooden box, revealing treasures preserved with wartime precision. A child's ration card, a folded map with pencil-marked routes, and, most damning of all, a letter in his grandfather's unmistakable block print. To the girl in the cellar, it began, "If you're reading this, the sun came up after all." Daniel's vision blurred. Somewhere in France, a scared kid had clutched this letter like a lifeline. And somewhere in America, a broken soldier had tucked his heroism away in a drawer, leaving only a medal and a mystery behind. The pawn shop's walls seemed to breathe around them, heavy with the ghosts of choices made and debts unpaid. Rose's next words would change everything. But for now, in this suspended moment, there was only the photograph, the truth, and the terrible, beautiful weight of legacy finally remembered. The wooden box between them might as well have been a vault, its contents more precious than any gold in Rose's shop. Her arthritic fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the envelope from its resting place. Yellowed with age, its edges softened by decades of handling, yet still sealed with the same military precision Henry Cross had likely used when folding it. 20 years, Rose said, her voice roughened by memory. That's how long I've kept this account separate. A little each month, whenever the shop did well. She slid the envelope across the glass counter, its weight whispering of compound interest and compounded hope. I never touched it. Not once. Daniel recoiled as if it were live ordnance. Miss Alcott, I can't. You misunderstand, she interrupted, her French accent sharpening like a blade being unsheathed. This isn't charity. It's a debt. Her finger tapped the photograph where young Henry's hand rested on her shoulder. That night, hiding under those floorboards with gunfire above me, I made 2 vows. First, to survive. Second, she pushed the envelope closer until it touched Daniel's wrist. That if I ever found him or his kin, I'd repay what can never truly be repaid. The rain outside had slowed to a mournful drizzle, each drop on the windowpane echoing like a ticking clock counting down 70 years. Daniel stared at the envelope, seeing not money but the breadcrumbs of a child's promise. The skipped lunches, the foregone vacations, the quiet sacrifices of an immigrant shopkeeper who turned survival into success without ever forgetting the hand that pulled her from the rubble. Rose's eyes were flint now, all softness burned away by the furnace of memory. Your grandfather gave me more than my life that night. He gave me proof that goodness exists without conditions. That sometimes. Her voice broke. Sometimes angels wear dog tags. She unfolded the letter from the box, Henry's letter, its creases as familiar as her own reflection. He wrote this while recovering in a field hospital. Had a nurse smuggle it back to my village. The brittle paper crackled as she read aloud, "War's ugly but it can't kill everything. Look for the helpers, kid. Then be one." A shudder ran through Daniel. Those words, "look for the helpers," were the same ones Henry had muttered while teaching him to patch a flat tire at age 10. A philosophy passed like a baton across generations, now circling back to him through the most improbable of messengers. Rose's next move was decisive. From beneath the counter came a business card, Veterans United, and a spiral notebook flipped open to a name. "My nephew runs a security firm," she said, pen hovering. "Hires almost exclusively veterans. Stable work. Good benefits." Her gaze pinned him. "The money's yours regardless. But if you want what your grandfather really left you." She tapped the card. "Is this purpose? Just like he gave me?" The pawn shop's walls seemed to lean in, bearing witness as Daniel's calloused fingers, so like Henry's in the photograph, finally closed around the envelope. Not in surrender but in understanding. Some debts weren't meant to be paid off. They were meant to be paid forward. Outside, unnoticed by either of them, the rain stopped. And for the first time in years, Daniel Cross stood a little straighter, as if feeling the weight of a silver star, and the man who'd earned it, settle onto his shoulders where it belonged. The fluorescent lights of the Veterans Resource Center hummed overhead like a distant battalion of crickets, casting sterile light on a circle of folding chairs that had seen better decades. Daniel Cross stood at their center, his grandfather's silver star pinned above his heart, not as decoration but as armor. "I didn't come here to lead," he began, the words tasting foreign after so long spent swallowing his own voice. "I came because Rose Alcott handed me a letter my grandfather wrote in 1944, and it felt like getting orders from beyond the grave." From his backpack, he withdrew the fragile page, preserved now in a clear sleeve, and read Henry's words aloud to the 5 weathered faces watching him. "To the girl in the cellar. If you're reading this, the sun came up after all. War's ugly, but it can't kill everything. Look for the helpers, kid. Then be one." A silence thicker than jungle canopy settled over the room. Then from the back row, a grizzled Vietnam vet named O'Reilly cleared his throat. "My old man carried a letter like that from Iwo Jima. Never showed a soul. His knotted hands opened a wallet so worn it was nearly translucent. Kept it right here, till the day he died." The floodgates opened. One by one, the men, and 2 women, began unpacking their own fragments of history. A Korean War veteran produced a blood-stained map from Chosin Reservoir. A Desert Storm medic unfolded a child's drawing given to her by an Iraqi girl she treated. And O'Reilly, his voice cracking like ice over a frozen river, read aloud the last letter his platoon leader ever wrote, a missive meant for his newborn son, delivered instead to O'Reilly when the man took a sniper's bullet to the throat. Daniel pinned Henry's letter to a corkboard someone had dragged in from the break room. "This," he said, "is what I'm calling letters forward. Not therapy. Not a support group. Just passing the words along." He gestured to the growing collection. "So the next guy walking in here knows he's not the first to feel lost. And won't be the last to find his way back." The following Thursday, 8 veterans showed up instead of 5. Then 12. Then 20. The corkboard overflowed, sprouting dog tags, discharge papers, even a Purple Heart ribbon pinned beneath a note that read, "Wear this when you forget you're brave." And always in the front row, sat Rose, her hands folded around that same photograph of Private Cross and the girl he'd saved, her presence a silent reminder that some debts weren't meant to be repaid, only honored. When a fresh-faced Marine named Ruiz walked in one afternoon, her uniform still crisp from basic training, her eyes already older than her years, Daniel didn't hand her a pamphlet. He gave her Henry's letter and a blank sheet of paper. "Write to the next one," he said. "The one who'll sit where you're sitting a year from now, wondering if anyone understands." Ruiz's pen hovered. Then, with the determination of someone charging a hill, she began. "Dear future me, you survived today. That means you can survive tomorrow?" Around them, the walls whispered with 70 years' worth of courage, each letter a stitch in the fabric that connected Henry's war to Daniel's to Ruiz's, and to all the wars yet to come. The legacy wasn't in the medals or the monuments. It was here, in this room, where broken men and women kept showing up to remind each other. No soldier is ever truly alone. Not while their words still breathe. The basement of the Veterans Resource Center smelled of stale coffee and fresh hope. Folding chairs creaked under the weight of warriors as Daniel cross-pinned Elena Ruiz's letter to the overflowing corkboard. The young Marine's words, "You survived today. That means you can survive tomorrow," now stood beside a Vietnam medic's blood-stained bandages and a World War II Paus recipe for enduring solitary confinement. Rain lashed against the high windows as O'Reilly, his hands still shaking from last night's nightmares, reached into his rucksack. What emerged wasn't another letter but a small velvet box. The click of its opening echoed like a safety being switched off. "My daughter's wedding," the old Marine rasped. First time I wore my dress blues since '72. Couldn't make it through the father-daughter dance. His thumb brushed the silver star nestled beside a folded photograph. A younger O'Reilly holding a squalling newborn. "Took this right after the VA told me I'd never be fit to raise a kid." Around the circle, spines straightened. Here was the unspoken rule of letters forward laid bare. Courage came in fragments, and sometimes the bravest thing you could do was show the cracks. A hush fell as Rose Alcott rose from her usual chair. 4 weeks she'd been their silent witness, but today she carried Henry's photograph like a standard into battle. "In France," she began, her accent wrapping around the words like barbed wire softened by time, "we have a saying, les blessures deviennent de fenêtres. Wounds become windows." Her finger traced young Henry's face in the photo. "For 70 years I saw only the night he left me. But you?" Her gaze swept the circle. "You showed me the mornings that came after. Something extraordinary happened then." From his wheelchair in the corner, a double amputee from Fallujah named Carter reached into his jacket. What emerged wasn't a war relic, but a crayon drawing from his 6-year-old, a stick-figure soldier holding hands with a girl missing one ear on her teddy bear. The same bear from Rose's photograph. "My kid drew this after story time," Carter said hoarsely. "Her teacher read them, The Helper in the Cellar. That children's book about you and Private Cross." Rose's sharp inhale was the only sound in the room. Daniel watched as the Frenchwoman who'd survived the Blitz trembled before a preschooler's artwork. When she spoke again, her voice was a battlefield surrender. "They wrote about us?" Carter nodded. "Whole chapter on how you rebuilt that village school. My daughter sleeps with that book under her pillow." The circle tightened instinctively as Rose wept, not the quiet tears of memory, but great heaving sobs that shook her small frame. O'Reilly offered his bandana. The Vietnam medic rubbed her back. And Daniel, his grandfather's star warm against his chest, understood at last. This was how healing worked. Not in straight lines or dramatic breakthroughs, but in circles, each story layering over the last like rings in a tree, each wound letting in just enough light for the next seedling to grow. When Elena Ruiz stood to read her newest letter, this one addressed to the teacher who'd inspired Carter's daughter, her voice didn't shake. And when she finished, 20 battle-scarred hands reached to pat her shoulders, passing along what no medal could ever convey. "You're seen. You are part of this. The circle holds." The morning of the Veterans Day ceremony dawned with an unseasonable warmth, the kind of golden November day that made the scars on Daniel's hands ache less. He stood before the mirror in the Resource Center's cramped bathroom, adjusting his grandfather's silver star above a crisp white shirt, the first he'd bought since mustering out. Through the thin walls, he could hear the growing murmur of the crowd assembling in the main hall. Not just veterans today. Students from the local high school's history class fidgeted in the back rows, clutching notebooks. Gold Star families occupied the front seats with quiet dignity. Reporters hovered near the coffee urn, their cameras trained not on the podium, but on the massive letters forward display dominating the far wall, now home to 327 letters, each a lifeline thrown across generations. Daniel's fingers brushed the newest edition as he took the stage, a scanned copy of Henry's original 1944 letter to Rose, its edges digitally restored but its soul intact. The microphone squealed as he leaned in. "6 months ago," he began, "I walked into a pawn shop to sell the last thing that connected me to the man who raised me." A projector flickered to life, displaying Rose's photograph of Private Cross and the French girl. What I got instead was a lesson about what really makes it home from war. The screen changed, showing Elena Ruiz's first trembling letter. Then O'Reilly's account of passing his platoon leader's final words to a grieving widow. Then Carter's daughter's crayon drawing of the teddy bear with one ear, now framed beside Rose's original stuffed animal in a museum display. "We call it letters forward," Daniel continued, "but really it's humanity's oldest technology. The one thing that outlasts bullets and borders." He gestured to a group of JROTC cadets shifting in their seats. Private Cross never met these kids. Never will. But his words. He tapped the projection remote, bringing up a new image, a high school essay titled How a Dead Soldier's Letter Changed My Life. Those keep marching. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Daniel counted. But what mattered wasn't the applause. It was what happened after. As the crowd milled about the letter-writing station set up in the lobby, Daniel spotted Rose in her usual chair, holding court with a circle of teenagers. Her hands, once so careful with precious antiques, now gestured wildly as she described the taste of liberation chocolate. Nearby, O'Reilly showed a purple-haired girl how to fold a letter into a soldier's envelope. And at the far table, Elena Ruiz knelt beside Carter's wheelchair, helping his daughter address her first letter forward, to a future veteran not yet born. Daniel felt the weight before he saw the hand on his shoulder. The VA regional director stood beside him, holding a thick binder. "We want letters forward in every veteran's hospital from here to Hawaii," she said simply. Outside, the autumn sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the parking lot where Daniel's rusted pickup sat beside news vans and a shiny new bus from Silver Star Elementary. Somewhere in France, an old village schoolhouse bore a plaque with Henry Cross's name. Somewhere in Iraq, a medic carried Elena's letter in his flak jacket. And somewhere in this very room, the next great-grandchild of this improbable family was probably scribbling their first note to the future. Daniel touched his grandfather's star one last time before stepping into the crowd. The letters would keep coming. The circle would hold. And no soldier who'd ever penned their truth would truly fade away.